Dirty Scrap Podcast.
Hello, Jan. How are you?
I'm fine. And you? Can you hear me well?
I can hear you perfectly. Yeah, I'm pretty good. Very excited about it. This episode. Thank you so much for making the time. And as an introduction, I want just to say welcome to Dirty Scrap, the aluminum podcast. It's been a while. I think we met like a year ago during the Harbor show in Chicago. That is actually in a week, right?
Yes, it is.
And well, fortunately, we have today the opportunity to have you in the podcast. And just as a very like brief background of the podcast, Dirty Scrap is a podcast that's been like focusing more on recycling rates and aluminum recycling. But today, I think we will have a very nice and very interesting episode with you, the president of the Aluminum Association of Canada. And I want to dig in different topics, right? I want to talk about primary aluminum, secondary aluminum. Also, I want to talk about politics, and I want to talk about what is happening in the Middle East and how this is impacting the aluminum industry. And also, I want to talk about this relationship between Canada and US and how this tariff and the new administration is in some point impacting that relationship. But again, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And before we get into these, complicated topics, I want to be because one of the ideas of this podcast is to allow our audience to understand the people, the human being behind the charge, and the titles and everything. So I want to know because according to your profile, you've been involved in several different, let's say, charges as a vice president, and also you've been like very related to the environmental regulations. So I want first to understand your background, why you started in the aluminum, probably was by accident, as every one of us, right? But I want to understand very well your background, who you are, and where you're coming from. So if you allowed us to have the pleasure to hear about your background, please go ahead.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say that I'm very happy to join your podcast. It's an honor and a privilege for me. I have a very atypical background. I was trained as a lawyer many decades ago. I was in politics at the same time as I did my law school, which brought me into government relations, public affairs for about 30 years as a consultant, mostly involved in citing large industrial projects related to energy and to petrochemical industry. And following that, I became vice president of Quebec's natural gas distributor, which is now called Energier. And I was very actively involved in locating large LNG projects in the province and large natural gas pipelines and stuff like that. And then there was a job opening for the aluminium industry about 18 years ago. And I started then, and I've been through it all, I can say, over those years, because I started right on the great financial crisis back in 2008 and 9. That's when I landed in the job. The price of aluminium went from $3,800 a ton to $1,200 a ton. So when I asked my board going through the interview for the job, tell me in one sentence, what is your expectation from me? I come from totally outside of the box. The only contact I've had in aluminium in my life with aluminium, it was been with aluminium foil in the kitchen.
Right.
So I don't know anything about the industry, but I know a lot about what's behind this industry, which is economic development, environmental impacts, and energy. So they said, our world is changing. We need someone that can think out of the box and take us into the future. So that's when I started in the industry.
No pressure at all. Just develop the
this is
future
the-
of this industry.
Yeah, but this is having been a consultant for 30 years, this is exactly what I needed to hear. So basically, you can look at it as going by your own compass and your roadmap, and just forging your way into the future. And that's really how the past 18 years have been for me. I've been so privileged to be able to use the skill set that I had developed previously with those three different facets that are so intimately related to the industry: energy, public policy,
Right.
environment, and economic development. And we just repositioned the industry based on its environmental footprint, which is the best in the world. It's world class. We developed the economic footprint, so we were always associated with a remote region extracting resource-based industry.
Right.
And we were able to demonstrate that we're basically part and parcel of the whole economy in Quebec, because and in Canada, because 30% of our economic activity is around the greater Montreal and the greater Quebec City area. So all of a sudden, an industry that was considered as regional became central within the economics of the province, of the country. So by establishing our footprint, we were able to build new support for the industry moving forward. And then we went on to facing all sorts of disruptions in the market. We had the Russian metal disruption from 2014, 2018, 2022. Every 4 years for 12 years, there was something happening. And then we entered into the pandemic, which was as much of a market shock as the great financial crisis, but 10 years later. So this industry, and then we had the tariff situation with the Trump administration. So I've been managing crisis for 18 years.
Wow, interesting. What do you think you've been being able to have this great resilience through all these years facing these challenges on the aluminum industry? Because as you just said, you started in 2008 with this world crisis, right? How was the aluminum industry impacted at that time, and how the industry were moving forward through all these different challenges?
Very interesting question. If you go back in time, there's always a beginning to a story, and it's always further back than what people think. So before the great financial crisis, two fundamental elements moved in convergence with each other, which created in itself a tremendous crisis for the Western world in terms of aluminum industry. So the first one was China building up capacity. So, today we see China owning 45 million tons of primary smelting capacity out of the world's 75 million tons overall production. So it's massive. It's 60% of all of the world's production. But that did not happen overnight.
Oh, no.
It started back in, I would say, the late 1990s, when China embarked on an unprecedented initiative towards urbanization. I think it's like three 5-year plans ago. They always plan for 5 years. So basically, the decision was to move 800 million people from the country into cities to be built, non-existing. And when they made that decision, clearly steel, aluminum producers around the world saw this as the greatest opportunity in a lifetime. And started to build up capacity. I remember I got this story from someone I have a lot of esteem for, Dr. Carmine Nappi, who was the economist in residence at Alcan in those days. And he said, Jean, he said, I had this room full of computers back then, big computers. And he said, we were modelizing economic shifts around the world to assess the impact on the various metals, including aluminum.
Okay.
And when we looked at the numbers coming out of China, we were able, through our computer models, to assess how much extrusions would be required based on the number of windows per building in each city that was to be built. So you can imagine that those numbers were a huge incentive to say we have to build capacity because there's this huge market that's coming up. And so they did, until they found out that China had made the same calculations.
Definitely.
And ramping up manufacturing capacity to be able to provide the steel, the aluminum, and also to be able to employ those 800 million people moving into those new cities built for them and to develop the economy. So up until the buildings are up, the cities are working and everything, it makes sense. After it's done, the people still need to work. So what do? Well, you keep them into the manufacturing capacity for which there is less and less need until you're able to diversify the needs for aluminum through electric vehicles and all that stuff. So you're building up a huge, massive capacity backed by technology that you originally imported, that you then started to copy, and then you then improve up to the point where it became your own technology.
Right.
So in the course of those 20-year plus, China has become also a world leader in aluminum smelting technology. When you look at the patent, we did a landscape analysis of all the patents in primary aluminum over those 20 years. So the first 5 years, it's the Alcoas, Alcan, the large producers, Western producers. And there's a gear shift, very clear. As of, I would say, 2012, 2015, it's all China. All the patents in primary aluminum production, it's all Chinese. And
Why?
by far,
why China, and for example, why not Canada, that you have a really good primary
because
industry?
China through that moving from 2 million tons to 45 million tons, developed its own know-how. They have two state-sponsored, everything is state-sponsored.
Right.
So they have two things working for them, three things. They have state-directed economy. So when they say we move right, we move right. They have massive capital that's available from the state to make things happen. And they have critical mass that we don't have. So when they make things, there's 1.3 billion people. That's 3 times the US.
It's crazy. Yes, I know.
So it's not only one market, it's multiple markets. They can test things as they want. So in the aluminum story, what they've done is develop know-how by taking apart technology, improving it, making it cheaper, and rolling it out without license fees to users that are sponsored by the state. And the last thing that you want to factor in, which I find fascinating, is that China is it's a society of engineers. China has engineered its future by training Chinese people to become engineers.
Right.
There are 13 million engineers in China.
Wow.
That's 1/3 of Canada's population. And let's say that they're not all people that you would task on designing airplanes or whatever.
Right.
There's 13 million of them. So they can use them in very surgical places in a world like aluminum, as an example. So they have 2 huge research centers that pump out technology, and they've been building aluminum smelters every year in China, every year. So incrementally, their technology improves every year. And when they roll out technology, they can spread it around the ecosystem. So it's a planet aluminum in itself.
Right.
Very strong, very powerful. Let me give you an example. Our largest smelter, which is the largest one in North America, is Alouette in Sept-Îles.
Right.
It pumps out 670,000 tons of aluminum in a year. It's the equivalent of all your US production, all your US smelters together.
Right.
Okay? It employs about 1,300 people. In China, there is one smelter, that produces 1.3 million tons with 350 workers.
Just 350.
Do your maths. Twice Alouette, twice your total US production with 350 people.
Wow.
So it's all outdated. It's all Chinese patented technology. They're way ahead, way bigger.
Right. And do you think this is going to impact in certain way? Because I don't want to say that we are getting into like an industrial war, but in some point it is what it is, right? We are seeing that the world is changing and the industrial power obviously is not in the same hands today. But how concerning is this Chinese overcapacity? Do you think it's something that we need to be concerned about it?
So let me go back to the beginning of the story. So the one factor is China's rapid, massive growth. And at about the same time, the US deregulated its energy sector. So the prices were started going up. And this literally killed the US aluminum smelting capacity in the US.
Yeah.
That's when you went from probably something like 24 smelters to the 4 that are left today at half capacity. Because aluminum is all about energy.
It is.
40% of your cost is energy, of your input. Right. So through time, the Western world curtailed about 50 smelters, Europe, North America, mostly in the US, as China was ramping up capacity that was in a magnitude never seen before, and still today massively dominates the aluminum sector in the world.
Right. I mean, this history is incredible. Why do you think US took that decision when we were like seeing everything that was happening through the years? But because as you just said a minute ago, this is not something that is happening from one day to another, right? It's something that been building this approach for the last 20, 25 years probably. And in the US 40 years ago, we used to have a lot of smelting capabilities here. Why that change? And it is possible to recover that ability to be competitive on the primary side in the US, or what do you think?
So I have a saying, in aluminum, the cost is all about energy, the price is all about China. So China, because their cost to build is so low, sets the price on world markets for aluminum, relatively speaking, because they come in with very low capex production capacity, with which we can compare. Let me share numbers with you. In China, if you build a smelter today, your cost per ton of aluminum is about $1,800 a ton, equivalent. So a 100,000 ton smelter costs 1,000 times 1,800.
Right.
In Canada, my cost is about $9,000 a ton equivalent.
Why? And even in Canada, you are very competitive because you have hydropower.
And but I'm talking about the building, just the building cost, just building the smelter. I'm not even talking about the energy.
Got it. You're talking about just building the smelter, not about the production cost.
And it takes them a year and a half, 2 years at most, to build and deliver. It takes us 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So we're not even dead on arrival, we're dead on the start line. And it's no different in the US. The cost is the same. That's why the Oklahoma project, as an example, will only happen under the Chinese model. It's a totally subsidized project. When you look at the numbers, there's about $3 billion worth of other people's money in there.
How easy is to implement those models? Because as I am understanding right now, you need three or four different characteristics. Like you need the population, you need the government to be involved, you need the government to own part of the companies, and a lot of money coming from the government to do this or to make this happen. And also you need to be fast, flexible. It is
Yeah,
possible to copy that same format in our countries with
I don't
everything
think
that we
so.
have, right?
I don't think so because China is a non-market-based economy, so
There
the
you
state
go.
intervenes in all different ways. In Canada, the state does not intervene in such a massive way, and it cannot do that. So our advantage has always been access to large amounts of low-cost energy
Hmm.
and proximity to a huge consumption market, which is the US.
Hmm.
The competition for that energy, because it's in a very remote areas, and that's where the aluminum smelters are located. We are the large, what we call anchor tenants for energy, for stranded
Uh-huh.
energy. It's a different situation than in the US. In the US today, the same energy is very sought after by data centers to power
Right.
artificial intelligence. So let me share numbers with you again. Canada produces 3.3 million tons of aluminum in a year. It exports to the US 2.7 million tons out of that.
Oh, wow.
This 2.7 million tons requires 40 million megawatt hours of energy a year to produce. That's the equivalent of 4 Hoover dams in the US,
Mm-hmm.
which is what 466 data centers will consume in a year. So you have a choice as an economy to allocate your energy towards a goal, an end goal
Mm-hmm.
that meets your priorities in terms of economic security, national security. So is it trying to replicate capacity that you can import from Canada, which is an ally, a neighbor country, which takes 3 to 7 days to reach the market at most?
Right.
Or you power artificial intelligence through data centers that require tremendous amounts of energy. So I think there's an arbitrage to do as an economy. We don't need data centers as much as the US needs them because we don't have the population, we don't have the critical mass requirements.
Right.
So our energy is best put to use to produce aluminium and export
Mm-hmm.
it. This is
Right.
why we're so well integrated within the USMCA trade agreement with Mexico.
Right.
And that's why it makes sense to grow the North American fortress together.
But
It's a matter of resource
yeah.
allocation.
Right. But saying that right now, as it is right now, and I don't want to just forget about what we are talking about because the energy consumption and the data centers and everything, I want to go back to that
Sure.
because I think one of the issues that we will have in order, for example, talking about the US reindustrialization and trying to rebuild the smelters here is the cost of the energy that we are willing to pay in order to be competitive against the data centers that they are willing to pay a little bit more, not a little
Yeah.
bit more, almost three times more. But talking about the US and Canada, today, how do you describe the real relationship that we have right now between the two countries? Because for me, Canada is the best ally we can have from any point of view. But talking about the industrial point of view, how are you seeing this relationship during the last, let's say, 2 years?
So I've been invited very recently to join the advisory board of the Prime Minister Carney, on bilateral relations with the US. So these are
Okay.
discussions that we have
Right.
in an ongoing fashion. I think the relationship between industrial sectors, companies like company to company,
Mm-hmm.
supplier to customer, an aluminum provider with an OEM in the US, be it Ford, Toyota, or other, are very good because they're based on market fundamentals. Basically,
Right.
we provide good aluminum in a timely fashion. We are a secure source of supply, the most secure source of supply. So the relationship remains very good. The dynamics of the relationship
There you
are
go.
impacted by the politics of the moment. And this is unfortunate because it plays against the market. It plays against the end user. It's demand destructive at some point. It exposes us to substitution, and it builds in tremendous risk that, how could I say, is a showstopper for long-term investments. And at the end, this plays in the hands of, excuse me, of China and competing factions of non-market-based economy. And it plays against the interests of the US.
Right.
So again, the relationship between actors of the market is very strong. The politics of the moment are very bad for the dynamics. And I would say if I elevate myself over and beyond the industry, unfortunately, the relationship between the people of one country and the people of the other country are impacted.
Definitely.
There's a breach of trust that is felt in Canada very, very strongly. When you look at, we do surveys, we do polling across the country on an ongoing basis, and the level of the sense of almost treason is so high.
Yeah.
It's so unfortunate. People feel that they've been, how could I say, there's a rupture, a huge rupture in our historical relationship. And the majority of people in Canada think that we will never go back to how things were, which doesn't mean we won't have a relationship, but it will be different. There's the breach of trust is felt all across Canada, across party lines, across age groups. Like the notion of being able to rely on the US has been fragmented.
And do you think this, let's say, feeling is impacting the industry in some point, even though where we are having this good relationship with the aluminum players, it is this feeling impacting the real aluminum industry as it is? And do you think the United States is trying to, let's say, like get rid of this dependency from the Canadian aluminum? What do you think about it?
It's a very awkward situation in the aluminum industry.
Definitely.
Someone said the facts are stubborn.
Right.
They're a stubborn thing. And I think this is very true. Whether or not you agree with the reliance, the US reliance on Canadian primary metal, it's fundamental. This is the way the whole industrial value chain was built and developed across decades of relationship, going back to the Second World War.
Right.
I mean, these smelters were built by US interests. They're owned by foreign interests, including the US when you think of Alcoa. And
You're right.
they were built here because that's where the energy is. Basically, stranded energy capacity. And we've been pushing metal to the US all along. Now, today, we are in a situation where the industry in the US, some players, because of the impact of the tariff on the regional premium, tend to make huge amounts of money. They make the spread between the scrap and the primary, and it's very nice in the short term, but it's very dangerous for the long term because aluminum is starting to price itself out of the markets, and you cannot compete with Europe. So try ship an end product to Europe and be competitive when the price of aluminum there is at least $2,000 less than in the US because there's not a 50% tariff. So you're not competitive. And it's like a debt spiral through time. There's like some greed in there, making money in the very short term without thinking about long term. I don't know when it will come to an end, but it should happen in a not too distant future, because the next step after the price shock is the supply shock.
Right.
And this is what the Middle East situation is crystallizing. So at some point in time, the market, which is, in my idea, it's like a big snake that is swallowing shocks through time, at some
Yeah.
point in time, it's bulging back. So there's no more inventories left. So the price is going up. There's no more, there's less supply left. And then there's not only a price shock, there's a situation where the market doesn't access metal anymore.
Right.
And as suppliers, Canada can play two markets, Europe and the US.
Right.
And the more the US is using a tariff on Canada, the more we can use the arbitrage with Europe to compensate for the tariff, which plays against the US because they have to replace metal.
And what do you think is going to happen if you redirect your metal to Canada? What do you think is going to happen
So
between the US and Canada?
what has been happening since the June 4th 50% tariff?
Right.
Canada, in the weeks that followed, lost about $600 million US, continuing its shipping to the US until we started pivoting exports of commodity ingots to Europe. And through the fall, January, February, even March and April, we kept shipping about 25% of what we used to ship to the US, we kept shipping it to Europe.
Right.
Which basically forced the US to increase its price signal to shore up metal because they still need metal. So it demonstrates that we can arbitrage with another market when the US is not paying the full cost of the premium. Mm-hmm. And this plays to the disadvantage of the US because they're basically doing away with their most secure source of metal. So remember, we went through all those months of the fall, early the year, and then the Middle East crisis starts. So that's 700,000 tons of metal that doesn't come to the US anymore. In addition to Canada's commodity ingots that were going to Europe. And all this takes time to pivot back, and it impacts the market. So there's two things happening in my mind that are counterintuitive. There's a 50% tariff on your safest and most secure source of supply, and there's all this scrap going to China. So you're pushing out the metal that you should be privileging or favoring to come in, and you're letting go the scrap that you should be keeping into the market. What can I say?
Yeah, the question here will be, is this tariff truly helping rebuilding the primary aluminum capacity in the US?
It's not.
It is not.
It's not. By all accounts, it's not. So look at the numbers. There's been tariffs. The first iteration of tariffs under the Trump administration, there was a 10% tariff. So Canada was exempted with some other countries. We shipped under exemption all the metal to the US. Why? Because it lopsided the arbitrage in such a way that the US price was always better for us than the Europe one. So all our metal went there. The moment we found ourselves back under a tariff, we started arbitraging, shipping to Europe. So this is the first impact. The second impact is how much new capacity did you see coming back since the first 10%? Well, the first thing that happened is Century shut down about 250,000 tons of metal. So years later, billions of dollars of tariff into their pockets, they've announced a 10% increase. That's about 60,000 tons versus the 250,000 tons that were taken away. So no, tariffs don't make a new plant come up. No. It contributes to it, but it's not about tariffs. It's about two things: the cost of energy and the LME price, the fundamental price, and looking into the future.
Right. I mean, this conversation is super interesting. Let's go back to China. Do you think all this tariff application into the US and this, let's say, bridge breaking out between the relationship between Canada and US is helping China to get more stronger in the market? Or what do you think about it?
I wouldn't say that. How could I say? Our prime minister referred to Canada as a middle country. And I think we have to have both the humility to recognize that, and at the same time, be forward looking and try to see the opportunities that it offers us.
Right.
So this being said, we're not a major player in front of China.
No.
In the aluminum sector, the China factor to us is the following. Our market is the US and will always remain so.
Right.
What we see as a threat from China more and more is not metal coming out of China, but China using proxy countries to invest past the 45 million ton cap that they've set for 2025 and that they have reached in primary production capacity. And now they're exporting themselves through investing into Indonesia, where they are right now ramping up 4.3 million tons of new primary capacity. It's 1.5 times Canada's, with an objective of going all the way up to 13 million tons. Chinese owned capacity in Indonesia. So that metal will come into markets under an Indonesia origin, but it will be owned by China.
Right.
They're doing the same thing in Angola right now.
I know, yes.
So, you're talking about growing primary capacity in the US. By the time you finish building something, they've built 5 times that volume
Right.
at 1/5 of the cost somewhere else in the world.
Right. And it is not just how much time and cost will take to build it up. It's also how fast you can start it, right? And work with all the regulations, and also how competitive will be you against those guys when you have these energy prices very high in the US and the data centers willing to pay, I think it's $122-$25 per kilowatt per hour, when we need, I think, like around 40 bucks per kilo, right? To be competitive.
Yeah.
How? And do you think Canada and US, and I know the relationship is not the best one right now between governments and the people is hurt, but do you think it is in some point something that we can do together to protect the regional supply chain? Or at this point, it is going to be super complicated to rebuild that relationship?
No, I think that at some point in time, again, facts are very stubborn things.
Right.
At some point in time, mature people will be able to discuss how what we call in Canada the North American Fortress North America, stands to benefit from the recognition that by using our comparative advantages, we can grow the North American aluminum industrial value chain.
Right.
By Canada possibly increasing its production capacity, because we have the energy, we have clean renewable energy, which is very important for the future.
Sure.
And the US processing this metal into consumer goods, which basically means higher paid manufacturing jobs close to the market. Remember, for every Canadian smelting job, there are 13 processing jobs in the US related directly to that job. So it makes so much sense. And Mexico has its own part to play with casting and foundries and stuff like that. So I think that the Fortress North America model is the best way to compete with the China state-owned model. One country cannot do it alone, but the 3 countries together can make it.
Right. What is the impact that we are seeing right now into the aluminum industry and in these 3 countries that we should start or keep working together in order to be more powerful? What is the impact that we are seeing with what is happening in the Middle East right now, in the Strait of Hormuz and all these, war that we invented just in order to take more, I would say, natural resources, or getting more pressure to China? I mean, we can say a lot of different, things about it. I don't want to get into that because I don't want to hear any feelings. But what is the impact that we are seeing right now, and what is the impact that we will see? Because I think we are not seeing what is coming, but it's coming.
Yeah. So if we go back through the Middle East timeline, more than 60 days ago, the Strait of Hormuz was choked in. So
Right.
nothing going in, nothing coming out. At the beginning, the Qataris, the Qatalum, the aluminum smelting capacity was curtailed down to 60% of capacity.
Right.
So they removed 40% of their capacity because of a problem with the energy supply. Now let's remember, just for the auditor's interest, that you cannot take down a smelter without doing an orderly shutdown. If you run out of energy, you lose your pot lines, the metal hardens, and it's lost. So when you know that you're going to run out of energy, you have to, I say, put them to sleep. So you siphon out the liquid metal, you leave a bit, and then you use alumina to cap the pot lines. So then you had the Bahrain, that got bombarded. They lost energy. They had to curtail 4 lines out of 6.
Yep.
And then you had tremendous damage done to the Emiratis smelting operation in Al Tawila that was bombed. So they lost the plant.
Right.
So in various cases, you've lost about probably 400 to 500,000 tons of capacity in the Middle East. The Middle East represented about 700,000 tons coming into the US, but the rest that's still operating is not going out because there's still a chokehold. So as you move through time, you need to allocate your alumina in such a way that, because you haven't been able to replenish your stockpile, you're going to have to use what's left at some point in time to curtail what's left in production capacity. So this is where we are right now, because normally you have 60 to 80 days of stockpiled alumina. So we're approaching that critical point where you might see additional curtailment in the Middle East. The 2 areas that were not impacted is Oman, Sohar, and Saudi Arabia, because they're out of the damage circle. So the last ships to come out of the Middle East arrived in the US about 10 days ago. Those were the last ships that left just before the Strait of Hormuz was closed. So there's no additional ships coming in on a weekly basis. Nada, nothing.
So now what?
We're heading into the summer months. So our expectation is that at some point in time, there will be a supply shock. Some of the supply that was due to come in will not be there. The market is running through what's left of 1 to 2 weeks of inventories, where you normally have 6 weeks. And the price is increasing. We will see a price increase, LME, to about $4,000 a ton. As the LME increases, the Midwest premium will increase for 2 reasons. One, the 50% tariff is 50% of an increasing LME price. And also, Europe is in the same situation because they're dependent on the Middle East. So the price signals from the European market and the price signal from the US market will be competing against each other to bring in the replacement units into their respective market. So this is what we're facing at this point in time. It will happen over the summer months. That's where we are, and there's no capacity that can come in to replace this. India is 60 days away, and their stuff is already allocated to clients and everything. Canada is producing at 95-98% capacity. We cannot produce more. The only thing we can do, if the price signal is there, is to shift back what we were sending to Europe, shift it back to the US. But that's a matter of net back. It's comparing prices between the 2 markets.
Do you think this is going to make the aluminum market to collapse in the US?
No, I wouldn't say collapse, but different things can happen. Small mom and pop shops that are processing aluminum might be priced out of the market because they can't afford paying such a big price.
Too expensive, yes.
Exactly. some OEMs in the, let's say, automotive sector or even in the building and construction might look at substituting aluminum for something else because they have to project themselves weeks ahead to fill orders, and they have to arrange their supply chain. And some of them might be at a decision point for the next 10 years in terms of manufacturing cycle. And if they look at they compare the volatility of the price of aluminum over the past year compared to what they can get from something that they can use to substitute, then there's an arbitrage to do. So this is the world we're entering into. It's very hard to say where this will all end, but it's a lot of chaos.
Secondary aluminum producers, do you think they will be able to support this operation? Or I don't think so. I don't think we were there soon. I think we are lacking of technology, and we are lacking of, infrastructure here to support the full operation by secondaries. But what do you think about it? Because we always are talking about the primary sector, and definitely we need more primary metal in the US. That is a fact. But also we want to go more green, and we want to introduce and get more importance into the secondary sector. Definitely is one of the goals that we have for 2030. But now, with everything that is happening with and with the lack of infrastructure that we have right now, are you seeing that like secondary sector can be this support that we need in order to go through all this that is happening right now?
It's a very interesting question. I think that the future has a lot in store for secondary for all the good reasons. Greenhouse gas emissions reduction, energy use reduction. Again, facts are stubborn.
Right.
So,
yes.
So you have three silos for recycling. If you don't factor in the pre-consumer scrap base, which is looped back into the production cycles very easily, it's well established. So you have three silos. One is the buildings, the second one is the automotive, and the third one is consumer packaging. So the aluminum in a building, when the building is deconstructed, is captured at about, let's say, 98%. It's very easy. It's a well-established ecosystem. The problem is a building stands high for 75 years.
Right.
So you can contemplate the aluminum in a building for more years than the time it will take to transform it once it's available.
Right.
So that's one thing. The number two is automotive, life cycle 12 years. So high capture rate, but it takes quite a while to get it back. And then you have the technological problem of sorting, the Twitch and Zorba and all that stuff.
Right.
And then the last one is consumer. And consumer, we talk a lot about UBCs, beverage cans. It's a tremendous asset, but it's all about consumer behavior.
Right.
So if you as a society are not willing to go to the extra stretch of mandating behavior by imposing deposits, I'm sorry,
it's not happening.
Able to go beyond 40, 50%, and the rest is going to landfill. And we have good examples here in Canada because it's mandated. So we had a deposit in Quebec of 5 cents a can for, 15 years or 20 years. And no government wanted to touch this because, there were the counter thought of saying, well, this is a tax. Well, it's not a tax. No. You get it back when you bring back your can. So when we moved up from 5 to 10 cents, the rate of deposit increased, like it's Pareto's law. So the 5 cents was like 20% of effort to get the 80% of result. But the last threshold, which was how do we get that 20%? Well, you have to really do the flip and bring it up to 10 cents. So this is what the governments did. And not only that, they widened the scope of aluminum containers. Now everything is included. So it increases the capture, it does the job, but it's counterintuitive in the US. It's very local. And so it's, I'm sorry, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow.
No, it is not. It is not. It is not. I'm fully agree with you, and believe me, I am very like into the secondary aluminum capabilities in the US. That's what we do in our company. But I'm not seeing not just the infrastructure, but also the mindset. It's not something that they are willing to change like this in order to understand better technology, better sortation processes, better decoding processes that will allow them not just to increase recycling rates, but also to have better aluminum recoveries.
Yeah.
I am not seeing this happening tomorrow.
And
So
it should be happening now. It should be happening now. Why? Because the price of aluminum is so high, it should
exactly.
incentivize this.
Exactly. Exactly. So, in order to start moving just like ending this episode with all this everything that we've been talking about, if you look 10 years ahead, what does the aluminum industry looks like with everything that we have right now? And do you think it is like a misunderstanding between the primary sector and the secondary sector? Because one of the things that I am seeing here in the US, at least I've been in this industry for 10 years already, is that looks like we are not able to understand that if we vertical integrate our whole ecosystem from the scrap yards, the primary sector, the secondary cast houses, and the final user, like final user, end user, OEMs, foundry guys, we are not seeing these as a potential, let's say, option for us to have this vertical integration. We are seeing scrap yards, one industry, secondary, another industry, primary, another industry. How it looks in 10 years, this industry, and do you think it is going to be a way to merge together the primary sector and the secondary sector for the good of the industry?
I think there's some of it right now. When you look at the Rio Tinto Metalco
Right,
undertaking, it makes a lot of sense, and it makes even more sense today than when it happened.
right.
I think that primary producers clearly see that the growth in the future in terms of numbers will be more to the benefit of the secondary than to the primary, whilst there will be growth for the primary. Why? Because of two things. We need to electrify economies in the coming decades. Electrification is all about aluminium.
Yep.
And many parts of electrification are all about primary aluminum. If you think about transmission lines, as an example, thousands and thousands of miles of transmission lines that need to be built up will call for primary metal.
Right.
And you know that better than I do, but when you produce with recycled aluminum, you still need primary aluminum.
Definitely.
So the image I use is primary aluminum is to secondary aluminum what yeast is to bread making. Always need some yeast.
Yeah.
So I think there is an awareness, a growing awareness to the fact that the future is calling for a mix, a growing mix of primary and secondary. I don't know how it will materialize because I don't see vertically integrated plays, because it's all about risk management.
Right.
And if you remember 20, 30 years ago, we had vertically integrated players. Alcan owned from the bauxite to the pipe plate.
Right.
And they divested in order to concentrate, to focus, and be less responsible for marketplace that were more about distribution and stuff like that. So I don't think we're going to go back to that, but I think we're probably heading towards a more comprehensive, technology-driven approach to making more out of recycled than we're doing today. So the last point on this is it will require comprehensive, enabling policy making to make this happen in the US.
Yeah, I am 100% agree, Jan. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think it was very insightful. The audience would love it. And if you have any other advice for the aluminum industry, mostly for the US industry, what you will say?
Get away from the short-term vision of the impact of a 50% tariff on revenue generation, look at the long term and secure your Canadian supply base. Throw a USMCA trading space that allocates a recognition that aluminium is a foundation of the industrial base in North America, so that anything that comes from Mexico, the US, and Canada should be treated the same without any tariffs. This is how we can grow the pie together.
100% agree. John, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And let's hope that, everything that is happening is for the best of the aluminum industry. And if it's not, I will encourage this industry to hear what you are saying right now and move in that direction. So again, thank you so much for being here with us. It was an amazing episode. Are you coming to Harbor this year?
No, I won't be there, but I have some of my staff that are going.
Okay, cool. I'll be there, so probably I will touch base with them. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Take your phone call. Take care.
Okay, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Scrap Podcast.